The laughter of children mixed with the clinking of silverware, filling Amos' dining room with the kind of holiday cheer that only Christmas could bring. Truman sat at the table, surrounded by the warmth of family, a cup of steaming cider in his hand. He tried to let the flickering glow of candles and the smell of roasted turkey ease the ache of loneliness he had carried since Eleanor passed. But somewhere in his chest, there was always a hollow space where her presence used to be. Tonight, though, he allowed himself a small measure of peace. For the first time in years, Christmas felt almost whole again. And then the phone rang. The shrill sound cut through the air like a knife through wrapping paper, silencing the room for a beat. Truman pulled the phone from his pocket, glancing at the screen. Unknown number. He frowned. Strange time for a telemarketer, he thought. Still, something urged him to answer. Hello? His voice carried the warm brightness reserved for family calls. A man's voice replied, urgent and trembling. Go home, immediately. The words froze him. His heart stumbled against his ribs. Around the table, Amos and Violet were still talking, the children chattering about presents, completely unaware that Truman's entire world had shifted in a single sentence. Who is this? Truman asked, his voice tight. No time, the caller snapped. Trust me. Go home, now. The line went dead. Truman stared at the phone, gripping it so tightly his knuckles turned white. For a moment, he thought it had to be a prank. But the man's tone, there had been something real in it. Fear, desperation, urgency. His appetite vanished. The warmth of the room seemed to evaporate, replaced by an icy dread that spread through his chest. He pushed back his chair abruptly. Violet turned, startled. Is everything all right? Truman forced a smile that felt thin, fragile. I need to see. Step outside for a moment. He moved quickly, grabbing his coat from the rack near the door, his mind racing. Should he ignore it, return to the table and pretend nothing happened? Or should he trust the stranger's warning? The December night air hit him hard as he stepped onto the porch, snowflakes drifting lazily from the sky. The street was quiet, houses glowing with festive lights, the Hendersons across the street singing carols around their piano. Everything looked normal, ordinary, safe. And yet, Truman couldn't shake the sense that his life had just veered onto a dangerous path. He walked to his car, phone clutched in his hand, and sat behind the wheel, staring at his own reflection in the windshield. The man's words echoed in his skull. Go home immediately. His rational mind fought back. It made no sense. But beneath logic, something deeper gnawed at him. A father's instinct, a husband's memory, a man's gut telling him this was no coincidence. That call wasn't a mistake. Finally, Truman turned the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life, headlights cutting across the snowy street. He glanced back once at Amos's warm, glowing house, the place where he should have been enjoying pie and presents, and then pressed the accelerator. The night swallowed him whole as he drove away, leaving behind Christmas laughter for a mystery that waited in the dark. The drive back toward his quiet home stretched longer than usual, each passing street lamp flickering across Truman's windshield like the ticks of a clock counting down. His heart hadn't slowed since the call. The words still rang in his ears. Go home immediately. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, replaying them over and over, searching for some hidden meaning. But as the familiar streets of his neighborhood came into view, a different ache rose within him, an old ache that had nothing to do with strange phone calls or potential emergencies. It was the loneliness that lingered in his chest, one he had tried to hide beneath layers of tradition and routine. For years, Christmas had been sacred. Eleanor had made it so. She brought magic into their home, gingerbread cookies laid out in neat rows, stockings filled with thoughtful trinkets, and a tree so carefully decorated it looked as though it had stepped out of a magazine. She was the heartbeat of their family. Even when money was tight, Eleanor found ways to make Christmas sparkle. Truman could still see her laugh in the kitchen, flour dusting her auburn hair as she rolled out sugar cookies. He remembered Amos as a little boy, tugging at Eleanor's apron strings, begging for a taste of icing. Those days had been filled with warmth, love, and the kind of joy that seemed unbreakable. But Eleanor's passing had left a silence that not even the crackling of the fireplace could fill. And Amos had changed. Where there was once a boy with eyes wide in wonder, there now stood a man hardened by adulthood, by distance, by something Truman couldn't quite name. He remembered their last painful conversation before the so-called reconciliation call, Amos's voice had been cold, measured, almost mechanical. "I've decided we're spending Christmas just with our immediate family this year, without you." The memory stabbed at Truman's chest like a shard of ice. He had begged for an explanation, asked if he had done something wrong, but Amos had brushed it off with chilling finality. "I just want a peaceful holiday." Truman had sat alone in his dimly lit living room that night, Eleanor's photograph on the mantel, staring back at him with the kind of compassion only memory could hold. He had whispered into the silence, asking her what he had done wrong. There had been no answer, only the sound of the grandfather clock chiming, marking the emptiness that filled his home. That was the kind of isolation Truman carried into this night, the sense that he was a man out of place, excluded from the family he had once built, abandoned by the only son he had left. And yet, the next day, Amos had called again. His voice softer, more familiar, dripping with apology. "I want you to come for Christmas dinner after all. Violet and the kids are looking forward to seeing you." Relief had flooded Truman then, quick and overwhelming. He had wanted so badly to believe it, that Amos had changed his mind, that his family wanted him again, that Eleanor's wish for unity wasn't completely lost. But even in that relief, a shadow lingered. Amos's words had felt rehearsed, like lines read from a script rather than a son's genuine change of heart. Still, Truman had clung to hope. He had thrown himself into preparations, cooking Eleanor's recipes, buying thoughtful gifts, wrapping them with care. He convinced himself that reconciliation was possible, that maybe, just maybe, this Christmas could be the start of healing. But as the snow crunched beneath his tires and his darkened house came into view, Truman felt that earlier optimism waver. Isolation was a heavy weight, and tonight it pressed harder than ever. The unknown caller's warning had ripped away the fragile illusion he had been building for weeks. He pulled into his driveway, staring at the cold, silent house. The windows reflected nothing but darkness, and for a moment he saw his own reflection staring back. An aging man with tired eyes, fighting to hold on to traditions that seemed to be slipping through his fingers. Truman shut off the engine but didn't move. The phone sat on the passenger seat beside him, black screen hiding its secrets. He thought of Eleanor's voice on her final Christmas, weak but firm. "Promise me you won't let distance grow between you and Amos." "I tried, Eleanor," Truman whispered into the empty car. "God knows I tried." And now, as he sat in the driveway, the strange call, the memories of rejection, and the growing gulf between father and son all blended together into a single suffocating truth. Truman wasn't sure if his family still had room for him at all. The next morning, Truman sat at his kitchen table with a bowl of oatmeal that had long since gone cold. The newspaper lay folded beside him, but he hadn't turned a page. His eyes kept drifting to the photograph on the nightstand, the one of Eleanor laughing in the kitchen, green dress dusted with flour, her smile brighter than the holiday lights. That photo had become his anchor, but even anchors couldn't stop a ship from drifting too far. Then the phone rang. His pulse spiked immediately, still raw from the mysterious call that had shaken him the night before. The shrill tone pierced the quiet, making his spoon clatter against the bowl. He stared at the caller ID, his breath catching. Amos. For a long moment, Truman just sat there, staring at the name. Hope battled with dread in his chest. Finally, he answered. "Hello?" His voice came out cautious, guarded. "Dad?" Just one word, but it hit him like a blast of cold air. Except this time, it carried something softer, warmth creeping around the edges. "I want to apologize for yesterday's call," Amos said quickly. "I was completely wrong." Truman's throat tightened. He gripped the edge of the table to steady himself. "Son, I'm so glad you called back. I was worried I'd done something." "No, Dad," Amos cut him off. "You didn't do anything. I was stressed about work, and I took it out on the wrong person. Violet reminded me how important our family traditions are. We want you to come for Christmas dinner after all." Relief washed through Truman so quickly it made him dizzy. He closed his eyes, gripping the one tighter, as if holding on to the moment. "Of course I'll come. Your mother's turkey recipe, and I'll bring the cranberry sauce." "That sounds perfect, Dad. Bring everything you usually make. The kids will be so excited. Violet's really looking forward to it, too." The words tumbled out so easily, so smoothly, almost too smoothly. Truman's joy bubbled like champagne, but beneath it, a nagging unease stirred. He hesitated, then asked, Amos, what made you change your mind so suddenly? Yesterday you seemed so certain. There was silence for half a breath. Then Amos's reply came fast, rushed, overlapping Truman's words. Just realized my mistake, that's all. Listen, I need to run. Work calls, you know how it is. We'll see you Christmas Day around noon. Wait, son, can we talk for just... Love you, Dad. See you soon. The line went dead. Truman lowered the handset slowly, staring at it as if it might explain what had just happened. His heart was thudding, but not from relief anymore. For a moment, he had felt pure joy. His family restored, Christmas saved, Eleanor's fears proven wrong. But now, in the silence of his kitchen, doubt seeped in like cold air through a cracked window. Something hadn't sounded right. Amos's apology had been perfect, almost scripted. The pauses too calculated, the tone just a shade too practiced. It was the kind of speech one gives when trying to convince rather than confess. Truman stood and paced to the window, looking out over the snowy yard. The Peterson kids were already outside, building a snowman, their laughter carrying across the still air. Normal families, normal December mornings. Why doesn't this feel normal? He muttered. He replayed the call in his mind, picking apart every phrase. Violet reminded me. Since when did Violet need to remind Amos of their family traditions? Amos had lived those traditions his whole life. Why emphasize her support so specifically, as if he needed her permission to invite his own father to Christmas dinner? The unease hardened into something sharper. Yet, Truman shook his head and tried to brush it aside. Maybe I'm overthinking this, he whispered to Eleanor's memory. He apologized. He wants me there. Isn't that what matters? Still, as he moved through different emotions of his day, washing dishes, recycling the newspaper, rinsing his coffee mug, the questions lingered. Amos had deflected every attempt at deeper conversation. He had rushed off the phone as though afraid of being asked something that might unravel the neat narrative he had just spun. Truman sat back down at the table, Eleanor's photograph catching the light from the window. He traced the frame with his fingertip, whispering, "Did he mean it, Eleanor, or was he just saying what he thought I wanted to hear?" No answer came, only the soft hum of the refrigerator and the muted ticking of the clock. For the first time in years, Truman felt both hopeful and unsettled. He had been given the invitation he longed for, but wrapped in it was a seed of suspicion he couldn't quite shake. And deep down, in the quiet of his heart, he wondered if that seed was about to grow into something much darker. The days leading up to Christmas became a blur of activity for Truman, each task performed with a kind of quiet determination. The uneasy questions about Amos lingered, but Truman buried them beneath the comfort of tradition. He had been given a second chance, an invitation back into the heart of his family, and he was not going to waste it. On December 2nd, he rose early, humming a half-forgotten carol as he brewed his morning coffee. For the first time in years, his house seemed alive with purpose. A notepad sat open on the kitchen table, already filled with a meticulous list: turkey, cranberry sauce, Eleanor's stuffing, and the special white wine she always insisted on using for her marinade. At the butcher shop, the line wound long with holiday shoppers, but Truman waited patiently. When his turn came, he leaned across the counter, his voice steady. "I need your finest turkey," he said, as though the very success of Christmas hinged on it. The butcher, a round-faced man with kind eyes, grinned knowingly. "Bringing the family together, huh? I've got just the thing." He hoisted a plump, 22-pound bird onto the counter. "This one'll feed a small army." Truman ran his hand over the smooth skin, already imagining it golden and crisp, filling Amos's house with the fragrance of rosemary and garlic. He paid without hesitation, cradling the turkey as though it were more than just food, as though it were the vessel of reconciliation itself. December 23rd found him wandering the crowded mall, gift list in hand. For Timmy, he chose a model airplane kit, the kind that echoed the wooden toy Amos once clutched as a boy beneath their own Christmas tree. For Sarah, he found an art set, pencils arranged like a rainbow in a polished wooden box. Each gift carried a memory, a fragment of the past folded into the present. That evening he returned home and spread Eleanor's old recipe card across the counter. Her handwriting, still elegant despite the years, guided his hands as he minced garlic and stripped rosemary sprigs. "Hope I remember this right, Eleanor," he whispered, massaging the marinade under the turkey's skin. "This has to be perfect." The smell filled the kitchen, rich and earthy, and for a moment, Truman felt her presence beside him, watching, approving. On Christmas Eve morning, the house hummed with quiet energy. Truman wrapped the gifts with careful precision, folding each corner sharp as a blade and tying ribbons with deliberate care. He polished his shoes until they shone, pressed his best holiday shirt, and laid out the tie Eleanor had once called his lucky charm. But even as he moved through the rituals, unease flickered at the edges of his thoughts. Amos hadn't called to confirm details, no mention of what time to arrive or whether to bring wine. The silence stretched long, and with every hour, Truman found himself glancing at the phone more often, waiting for reassurance that never came. That evening, while rinsing the last of the marinade bowls, Truman caught sight of his neighbor Frank Larson peering through the kitchen window, curiosity etched across his weathered face. Frank tapped violently on the glass. "Big plans tomorrow?" Truman smiled, a little too quickly. "Christmas dinner with Amos and his family. We're going to be a real family again." Something flickered across Frank's expression, concern, maybe, or doubt, but he only nodded. "That's wonderful, Truman. You deserve happiness." When Frank walked away, Truman tried to shake off the unease that returned with full force. Why had Frank looked at him like that? Why did anticipation feel more like anxiety? By the time he lay down that night, the gifts stacked neatly by the door and the golden turkey resting in the refrigerator, his heart still raced. He told himself it was just nerves, that anticipation always came with jitters. Tomorrow would be perfect. It had to be. Yet in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, Truman couldn't silence the voice whispering at the back of his mind, "Something isn't right." Christmas morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight glittering off the snow like a field of diamonds. Truman rose with deliberate care, each action almost ceremonial. He shaved slowly, straightened his tie in the hallway mirror, and polished his shoes one final time. Today was not just another holiday. It was a chance at restoration, at reclaiming a piece of the family he thought he had lost. The turkey carrier felt heavier than expected as he lifted it into the back seat of his car. The wrapped gifts, stacked neatly beside it, seemed to glow with promise. Before locking the door, he paused, glancing back into the house. Empty rooms looked back at him through frosted windows, a reminder of what had been lost, but also of what might yet be regained. He took a deep breath, turned the key in the lock, and whispered to Eleanor's memory, "This one's for you." Amos's driveway crunched under his tires when he arrived. Strings of lights outlined every window and door frame, creating a picture-perfect holiday scene. Truman's chest tightened at the sight. For a moment, he let himself believe this was what family looked like again: warmth, welcome, and togetherness. The front door swung open before he could knock. Violet's smile greeted him, dusted with flour from the kitchen. "Truman, we're so glad you're here. Come in before you freeze." The warmth of the house enveloped him instantly. Cinnamon, pine, roasted vegetables. Holiday music drifted softly in the background, while lights sparkled across polished floors. Timmy appeared at his elbow in a blur of excitement. "Grandpa Truman, did you bring presents? Can we open them now?" "Let your grandfather get settled first," Violet laughed, relieving Truman of the turkey carrier. "My goodness, this weighs a ton. What did you do to it?" "Eleanor's secret marinade," Truman said, unwinding his scarf. 24 hours of garlic, rosemary, and patience. Martha Harrington, Violet's mother, emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her eyes widened at the sight of the turkey. "This bird is magnificent. Truman, you must share Eleanor's secret with me. Mine always come out so dry." "The secret," Truman replied with a small smile, "is time. Eleanor always said good things can't be rushed." As he spoke, Walter, Martha's husband, and shook his hand firmly, nodding in approval. It felt good, Truman hoped, like belonging again. Finally, Amos appeared, straightening his tie with movements too precise, too deliberate. His smile was polite, his words carefully measured. "Thanks for coming, Dad. This means everything to us." The phrase hung in the air a moment too long, and Truman found himself studying Amos's face. The smile reached his mouth, but stopped short of his eyes. There was something practiced in the way he carried himself, something just slightly off. Before Truman could think too hard on it, Timmy grabbed his hand and dragged him toward the dining room. The table gleamed under candlelight, Violet's fine china, cloth napkins folded into triangles, crystal glasses catching the glow. Truman's turkey took center stage, its golden skin glistening like lacquered amber. "Would you carve, Truman?" Violet asked, offering him the knife. "With pleasure." He carved with steady hands, each slice tender and fragrant. The marinade had worked its magic. The first bite drew appreciative murmurs from around the table, and for a moment Truman felt the kind of pride only Eleanor used to inspire in him. Conversation flowed easily at first, Walter asking about retirement, Martha praising his dishes, the children chattering with excitement. Even Amos joined in, laughing at small jokes, sharing stories from work. But Truman noticed the cracks. Amos checked his watch when he thought no one was looking. He startled when someone's phone buzzed. His laughter carried the right notes but felt hollow, echoing more than it resonated. Still, Truman allowed himself to relax, to let the rhythm of family pull him in. When the plates were cleared, Sarah leaned forward timidly. "Grandpa, can we open presents now?" Timmy bounced in his chair, pleading, "Please, please, please." Violet chuckled. "All right, but let your grandfather hand them out." The living room soon filled with torn wrapping paper and gleeful shouts. Timmy, Seth's eyes widened at the airplane kit. "A Cessna! Can we build it together, Grandpa?" "Of course," Truman said, warmth spreading through his chest. "That's what grandfathers are for." Sarah hugged her art set tightly. "I'm going to draw our whole family," she announced solemnly. "Even great-grandma Eleanor, so she can be with us, too." The room quieted at her words. For a heartbeat, Eleanor's absence was a presence itself, soft, bittersweet, like a smile from somewhere unseen. Truman swallowed hard, his voice rough. "She would have loved that, sweetheart." The moment passed, replaced with laughter and chatter, as the children dove back into their treasures. Truman leaned back in the armchair Violet had set aside for him, loosening his tie. Contentment settled over him like a warm blanket. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to think, this is what Christmas is supposed to feel like. And yet, in the corner of his vision, he saw Amos again, checking his watch, glancing at his phone, carrying himself with a tension that no amount of laughter could disguise. The question Truman had buried all week rose again in his mind, sharper than ever. What is my son hiding? The laughter of children still echoed through the living room, wrapping paper scattered like confetti across the floor. Violet and Martha were in the kitchen, tidying up dishes, while Walter leaned back in his chair, telling Truman about his grandson's baseball achievements. For a fleeting moment, the evening seemed perfect, so ordinary, so warm, so safe. Then Truman's phone buzzed in his jacket pocket, once, twice, insistent. At first, he ignored it. He didn't want to break the spell, but when it buzzed again, vibrating with sharp urgency against his chest, he excused himself from Walter's story and slipped into the narrow powder room off the hall. The door clicked shut behind him, muffling the cheerful sound. Sea of family. He pulled out the phone, unknown number. His stomach tightened. He hesitated for a moment, then swiped to answer. "Hello?" His voice was sharp, wary. "You need to get home, immediately." The same voice, urgent, unfamiliar. The kind of tone that stripped away the possibility of jokes or accidents. Truman's reflection in the mirror stared back at him, eyes wide, color draining from his face. "Who is this? What are you talking about?" "That doesn't matter," the man cut in. "Just trust me. Go now." The line went dead. For a long moment, Truman stood frozen, phone still pressed to his ear. He could hear the muffled sound of Timmy explaining airplane parts to Sarah just beyond the bathroom door. The normalcy of it felt surreal, like a dream he was about to wake from. His thoughts spun wildly. A fire? A break-in? A gas leak? Had he left something running at the house? Or was it all nonsense, the cruel game of some stranger with a wrong number? He checked the screen again. No name, no voicemail, just silence. His breathing grew shallow, his shoulders tense. Instinct screamed louder than reason. This wasn't random. This wasn't meaningless. Something was wrong. A knock on the door startled him. "Dad? You okay in there?" Amos's voice carried through the wood, perfectly timed, perfectly calm. "Just a minute," Truman managed, his voice steadier than he felt. He looked once more at his reflection. He saw not just a 68-year-old man in a suit and tie, but a father teetering between two worlds, the warmth of family celebration on one side and the chilling urgency of a stranger's command on the other. Finally, he gripped the doorknob. His hand trembled as he twisted it. The dining room greeted him with warmth and light. Violet drying a dish towel, Walter sipping coffee, children sprawled across the rug with their toys. It was everything a Christmas gathering should be, and yet, Truman couldn't shake the feeling that he was an imposter in a play, that everything around him was staged while something far more dangerous waited in the she-saw. Udows. He cleared his throat. I need to go home. The words fell like an axe, cleaving through the cheerful atmosphere. Violet turned in surprise. Home? But dessert isn't even out yet. I baked your favorite apple pie. There's an emergency, Truman said, fumbling for his coat. Someone called. Something's wrong at the house. The room went silent, except for the soft sound of Timmy's toy airplane swooping through the air. Sarah looked up from her colored pencils, her young brow furrowed. What kind of emergency? Walter asked, his suspicion plain. I don't know yet, Truman admitted, his fingers clumsy with the coat buttons. They just said I needed to get home immediately. Amos rose from his chair, his face the picture of concerned confusion. Who called? Why didn't they explain? For a split second, Truman studied his son's expression. On the surface, Amos looked worried, but there was something beneath it, an undercurrent that didn't match his words. Concern, yes, but laced with something else, something that made Truman's pulse pound harder. I have to go, Truman said firmly. He bent to kiss his grandchildren on the forehead. Thank you for a wonderful Christmas. I'm sorry to leave like this. He stepped out into the cold December night, the family's voices trailing behind him. His engine sputtered in protest as he started it, snow crunching beneath the tires as he pulled away. In the rearview mirror, he saw them all clustered in the doorway, Violet hugging herself against the cold, Walter shaking his head, the children pressing their faces to the window. Amos stood apart, his silhouette stiff and unreadable against the warm glow of the house. The radio hummed softly with Silent Night as Truman drove into the empty suburban streets, Christmas lights twinkling in house after house. But nothing about this night felt silent or holy. His knuckles whitened against the steering wheel, the stranger's voice echoing in his skull. Trust me, go now. The streets leading to Truman's house stretched out like a frozen labyrinth. Most homes were dark now, curtains drawn, families gathered inside around fireplaces and glowing trees. To anyone else, it might have looked like the picture of serenity, but to Truman, the silence pressed in heavy, each shadow sharper, each empty corner a threat. He drove faster than usual, running yellow lights, his chest tight with unease. The stranger's words played over and over. Go home immediately. Logic scrambled for explanations. Maybe a prank, maybe nothing, but instinct clawed louder. Something was wrong. As his neighborhood came into view, Truman slowed. His breath caught in his throat when he saw his own house. Dark, still, silent. At first, it looked exactly as he had left it, but then his eyes caught the difference. The basement window. It no longer reflected the streetlight as it should. Instead, it gaped black, like an open wound in the foundation of his home. Beneath it, shards of glass glittered in the snow. His heart lurched. Someone was inside. Truman killed his headlights before turning onto his street, parking instead behind Frank Larson's oak tree 2 houses down. The engine ticked as it cooled, the only sound in the crystalline air. His breath fogged in short bursts as he sat there, frozen between fear and fury. Then, movement. A beam of light swept across his upstairs window, deliberate and methodical. Whoever was inside wasn't panicking. They were searching. His fingers fumbled for the phone. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's calm voice answered. This is Truman Dixon. There's someone in my house. I can see them moving around with a flashlight. Sir, what's your address? Are you in a safe location? He rattled off his street number, eyes never leaving the shifting beam of light. We've dispatched officers, the dispatcher said. Stay away from the house, until they arrive. Estimated response time is 10 to 15 minutes. 10 to 15 minutes. An eternity when an intruder was rifling through Eleanor's life, through the fragile remains of the family they had built. Truman's jaw tightened. They're not going to steal everything while I just sit here. He hung up before the dispatcher could protest. The trunk of his car creaked open. His hands, shaking from cold and adrenaline, pawed through old tools and supplies until they found something heavy and solid, a tire iron. Its weight felt reassuring in his grip. He moved silently, circling his house with deliberate caution. The broken window yawned at him, jagged teeth of glass pointing inward. Snow was scattered across the basement floor, where someone had climbed through. Inside, the sound of drawers opening and closing filtered faintly through the walls. Papers rustling, a chair scraping, not random vandalism. This was organized, calculated. Someone wasn't looking for jewelry or electronics. They were after something specific. Rage surged in Truman's chest. This was his sanctuary, his life with Eleanor, their memories, their security. And now, a stranger was pawing through it like it was theirs for the taking. The beam of light shifted again. The intruder was moving toward the stairs, toward him. Truman pressed against the wall, every muscle tight, breath shallow, tire iron raised. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might give him away. The basement light flicked on briefly, then off again, cautious, testing. Papers shuffled once more, then footsteps creaked closer. Then he saw it. A bag shoved through the window first, bulging with documents and valuables. Then a leg. Careful, testing for sharp glass. Truman's grip on the tire iron tightened until his knuckles whitened. The second leg emerged, followed by a torso, and in that dim, icy glow, recognition struck him like a hammer blow. Alton Reed. A neighbor, a man he had seen 100 times before, now crouched in Truman's yard, clutching a bag stuffed with his life. Alton! Truman's voice cracked through the stillness, hard as a whip. Alton froze, nearly losing his balance. The bag tumbled from his grip, papers scattering across the snow like grotesque confetti. He spun, his face ghost pale. Truman, I didn't want to. This wasn't my idea. Truman stepped forward, tire iron raised. Whose idea, then? Documents lay in the snow, and even in the dim light, Truman recognized them. Eleanor's will, bank records, stock certificates. His chest burned with fury. Answer me, he barked, voice shaking with a mixture of grief and rage. Alton's hands shot up in surrender, eyes wide, breath fogging in frantic bursts. He said you'd be gone for hours. He said you'd never know. Who said? Truman demanded, though his gut already twisted with suspicion. Amos knew. The words dropped into the snow like stones. Truman staggered back, the tire iron slipping from his numb fingers. The betrayal cut deeper than any blade. My son sent you? His voice was barely a whisper. Alton's eyes filled with tears. He needed Eleanor's will. The stock certificates. He said you were going to give millions to charity instead of family. He's desperate, Truman. Gambling debts, bad investments. He swore you'd understand eventually. The world tilted. The man he had raised, the boy who once pressed his nose against the window to count snowflakes, had orchestrated this. Truman stared at the scattered papers, Eleanor's handwriting bleeding into the snow, and for the first time in his life, Christmas felt not like family, not like faith, not like warmth. It felt like betrayal. The snow swirled around them, flakes catching in the beam of Alton's dropped flashlight. Papers lay scattered across the yard, pages from Eleanor's will, stock certificates, account statements, all fragile remnants of a lifetime now dirtied and wet. Truman's chest heaved as he stared at them, if the very ground had split open beneath him. My son sent you, he whispered, the words tasting like ash. Alton winced, tears freezing against his cheeks. Truman, I didn't want this. You have to believe me. Amos, he said you were planning to give it all away. The Boeing stock, the inheritance, millions. He said if we didn't act now, it'd be gone forever. Truman's hands shook violently, not from the cold, but from the weight of betrayal. His grip slackened, the tire iron slipping from his fingers into the snow with a muted thud. Millions, he muttered, the word bitter in his mouth. Eleanor's careful investments, her quiet sacrifices, all meant for good, all meant to help others, not for this. Alton nodded miserably, fumbling with words. 2.3 million, Truman. He showed me the papers. He said you were cutting him and the family out, giving everything to strangers. He begged me to help, said I'd get a cut, enough to pay off my own debts if I just did this. Enough to pay off your debts? Truman's voice rose, ragged with disbelief. And what about Amos? What debts are worth betraying your own father on Christmas night? Alton's shoulders crumpled. His voice was barely audible. 200,000. Gambling, bad investments. He's in deep, Truman. Deep with people who don't forgive. The words hit like hammer blows. $200,000. Enough to ruin a man, but still a fraction of Eleanor's life savings. All her years of careful planning, every dollar saved from her teacher's salary, invested in Boeing stock when others had laughed at the struggling company. She had believed in stability, in security, in the future, and Amos wanted to drain it all away to cover reckless debts. Truman bent slowly, his hands trembling as he gathered one of the scattered documents. The stock certificate felt heavier than paper should, as if it carried Eleanor's very soul within it. He traced her handwriting with a shaking finger. "She trusted me," he said, more to himself than to Alton. "She asked me to keep this family together. She believed we'd honor her memory." His voice cracked, breaking under the weight of it. "And Amos, my own son?" Alton tried to move closer, his hands raised in supplication. "He didn't mean to hurt you, Truman. He panicked. He swore you wouldn't notice, that it was family money anyway, that old men don't need millions." Truman's head snapped up, fury blazing in his eyes. "Old men don't need millions? That's Eleanor's money, her life, her sacrifices, her legacy." His voice thundered through the night, raw and ragged. "How dare he reduce her to nothing more than a balance sheet to cover his debts?" Alton shrank back, his breath coming in short bursts. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." In the distance, sirens wailed, faint but growing louder. Blue and red lights flickered against the snowy horizon, weaving through the bare trees. Truman's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out with stiff fingers, the screen lit with a name that made his stomach twist. Amos. Alton swallowed hard. "He's probably wondering why I'm not done yet. Why you left dinner so early. He's going to be furious when he finds out I got caught." Truman stared at the glowing screen, his thumb hovering above the accept button. The sirens grew closer, their wail a bitter chorus against the silent night. For a long moment, he imagined what Eleanor would say if she were standing beside him. She would not be shouting. She would not be trembling. She would look at him with that steady compassion, reminding him that truth mattered more than blood. He let the phone buzz till it went silent. The police cars finally turned onto his street, their headlights sweeping across the yard, illuminating the broken basement window and the trail of papers in the snow. Officers emerged quickly, efficient and alert, hands on their belts, eyes assessing the scene. Truman gestured numbly toward Alton. "That man broke into my home. He was stealing my wife's will, her financial papers, her stock certificates. But he didn't act alone." Alton shook his head miserably, already sagging under the weight of his choices. "Amos planned it. I just carried it out." The officers exchanged a grim look as one of them knelt to cuff Alton, reading his rights. The other turned toward Truman, voice firm but gentle. "Sir, we'll need you to give a statement, but for now, you're safe." Safe. The word rang hollow. Safe from the intruder, maybe, but not from the truth, not from the shattering knowledge that his own son had orchestrated the violation of his home. As the officers led Alton toward the patrol car, Truman remained in the snow, clutching Eleanor's documents to his chest. The sirens painted his yard in streaks of red and blue, like some twisted holiday display. And in that moment, Truman realized something that froze him more than the winter air ever could. Family bonds could be broken not by death, but by greed. The yard had become a stage, lit by flashing blue and red. Snow crunched under the boots of two officers as they moved with brisk efficiency, their radios crackling with clipped updates. Alton sat hunched in the back of the squad car now, hands cuffed, face pale as ash behind the glass. Truman stood apart, still clutching the damp papers against his chest. Eleanor's handwriting bled faintly where the snow had melted through, but the words remained legible. He would not let them be erased, not by Alton, not by Amos, not by anyone. "Sir, you're Truman Dixon?" the lead officer asked, approaching him with calm authority. His badge caught the light from a neighbor's Christmas display, twinkling against the winter night. "Yes," Truman's voice was hoarse. "This is my house. That man broke into it." The officer nodded, jotting notes on a pad. What was he after? Truman lifted the will, his hands trembling. "These, my late wife's will, Boeing stock certificates, bank records, together worth over $2 million. The officer raised his brows, exchanging a glance with his partner. "That's grand larceny territory." Behind them, Frank Larson emerged from his porch, bundled in a robe and slippers. His weathered face carried the relief of a man who'd feared he was too late. "Truman," he called, hurrying across the snow, "I saw someone moving around in your house earlier, around 9 o'clock. Couldn't just ignore it. Got your number from the neighborhood directory. Figured you'd want to know. Truman's chest tightened. It was you who called. Frank nodded firmly. You bet it was. I wasn't going to let someone tear through your home on Christmas. Truman clasped his neighbor's shoulder, gratitude welling in his chest. You saved more than just my possessions tonight. You saved Eleanor's legacy. The officer's pen paused. So, this wasn't random. The intruder knew the house would be empty. He's my son's friend, Truman said, the words bitter on his tongue. Amos invited me to dinner tonight. Alton knew I'd be gone. The officer nodded grimly. That explains the timing. We'll sort it out, Mr. Dixon. For now, Mr. Reed will be charged with breaking and entering, attempted grand larceny, and possibly conspiracy depending on how deep this runs. Truman's phone buzzed again in his pocket. He pulled it out. Amos. The name glowed on the screen like an accusation. The officer caught sight of it and tilted his head. Mig, he'd be useful to hear what he has to say. Truman hesitated, then pressed the green button and put the call on speaker. Dad, where are you? Amos's voice came through, perfectly calibrated with concern. We're all getting worried. You've been gone over an hour. Truman's throat tightened. He forced his voice steady. I'm coming back, son. We need to have a conversation. A pause. Truman could almost hear his son's mind working, scrambling to interpret his tone. Is everything all right? You sound different. Everything will be clear soon. Truman ended the call before Amos could press further. The officers finished collecting statements, their flashlights sweeping across the scattered papers, the broken window, the footprints in the snow. Alton sat slumped in the patrol car, his shoulders shaking as the weight of his betrayal bore down on him. When the officers finally drove away, Frank walked Truman back to his car. You sure you're ready for this? Going back there, facing him tonight? Truman looked at the documents in his hands. Eleanor's will, the stock certificates, their signatures crisp with her trust. He thought of the warm facade waiting at Amos's house, of Violet and the children, of the lies that had poisoned their Christmas. Some conversations can't wait, Frank, he said quietly. Some truths have to be told while they're fresh. His car engine groaned awake, headlights sweeping across the wreath on his front door, bright red against the broken window behind it, a mockery of peace. With Eleanor's legacy beside him on the passenger seat, Truman turned the wheel toward Amos's glowing house, ready to confront the wreckage of blood, family, and betrayal. Amos's house glowed ahead like a picture on a Christmas card, windows bright, lights twinkling across the eaves, shadows of family moving inside. To anyone passing by, it looked like the epitome of holiday joy. But to Truman, it was nothing more than a stage set, warm light concealing cold deception. He parked in the driveway, cut the engine, and sat for a moment in silence. Eleanor's will and the Boeing stock certificates rested on the seat beside him, damp but intact, like evidence in a trial. Truman placed a hand on them, drawing strength from the thought of her. You'll guide me through this, he whispered. He didn't knock. This was still family, even if that word had been poisoned. He opened the door and stepped into the warmth. Violet was folding dish towels in the kitchen doorway. Walter lounged in an armchair. Martha bent over a crossword. The children sprawled across the carpet with their new toys, laughter briefly filling the room. All eyes turned toward Truman as he entered. Truman, thank goodness, Violet said, rushing forward. Concern creased her features. What happened? You look pale as a ghost. Truman placed the documents on the coffee table with slow deliberation, arranging them so the handwriting and official letterheads faced outward. Ask your husband what happened. Amos looked up from the sofa. Relief flashed across his face at first, but quickly crumbled into confusion, then alarm, as his eyes fell on the papers. Dad, his voice faltered. What is this? These, Truman said, his voice level, are Eleanor's will and the Boeing stock certificates your friend Alton tried to steal tonight. He's in police custody now, charged with breaking and entering and attempted grand larceny. The room froze. Walter's magazine slid from his hands. Martha's pencil dropped from her crossword. The children stared, bewildered. Violet covered her mouth with one hand, eyes wide in shock. Amos shook his head, standing quickly, palms raised. Dad, I don't understand what you're talking about. You understand perfectly, Truman cut in, his voice sharp. Alton confessed. He said you planned this, that you invited me here so he'd have time to ransack my home. No, Amos's voice cracked. No, Dad, that's not. Walter rose to his feet, his voice edged with outrage. Amos, tell us this isn't true. But Amos's facade was already splintering. The denial faltered on his lips, his face collapsing under the weight of truth. "I didn't want it to go this far," he admitted, his voice trembling. You used Christmas," Truman said, his voice breaking. "You used your wife, your children, my grief, for cover, all to steal what your mother left behind." Violet stumbled back, her hand trembling against her lips. "Amos?" Her voice cracked. "Tell me this isn't real." But Amos' eyes were wet now, his voice unsteady. "I was drowning, Violet. 200,000 in debt, gambling, bad investments. The walls were closing in. They were going to hurt me, hurt us. I had no choice." "No choice?" Truman's words were knives. "You had every choice. You could have come to me, asked for help. Instead, you orchestrated theft, betrayal. You turned Eleanor's legacy into a target for criminals." The children clung to Martha, confusion etched in their young faces. Timmy held his model airplane like a shield. Sarah clutched her art set tighter, whispering, "Why is everyone yelling?" Truman's chest ached. He forced himself to kneel, meeting their wide eyes. "Your father made some very bad choices, choices that hurt people who trusted him." His voice softened, even as his heart shattered. "But you, my loves, you are innocent. Don't ever forget that." Violet's tears spilled freely now, her sobs raw and jagged. "How long have you been lying to me, Amos? About money, about work, about everything." Amos sank into a chair, head in his hands, the weight of his choices collapsing over him. "I thought I could fix it. I thought if I just got the money." Walter's face hardened. "By stealing from your own father on Christmas night, you've disgraced yourself, Amos." The room fractured under the weight of truth. The children's tears, Violet's devastation, Walter and Martha's disbelief, and Amos's unraveling guilt painted a scene Truman would never forget. Truman gathered the documents carefully from the coffee table, sliding them back into his bag. He straightened, his voice quiet but resolute. "The Boeing shares will go to veterans and education funds, just as Eleanor wanted. Her memory will be honored, no matter what you've done." Amos looked up, eyes pleading. "Dad, please." But Truman shook his head, his voice heavy with finality. "You chose lies over love, theft over trust. Family over greed is what Eleanor believed in. You chose the opposite." He turned to Violet, his tone softening. "You and the children are always welcome in my home. This was not your doing." Then he stepped into the cold December night once more, leaving behind the wreckage of a family destroyed, not by distance, not by time, but by betrayal. The snow crunched under his shoes as he walked back to his car. Behind him, Amos's house still glowed with Christmas light, but now it looked like a stage collapsing in on itself. The illusion gone, the truth exposed. Morning light crept through Truman's kitchen curtains, gray and soft, casting long shadows across the table. The house was quiet, too quiet, but no longer filled with dread. The papers Eleanor had entrusted him with, her will, the Boeing stock certificates, the bank statements, lay neatly arranged beside her framed photograph. Her green dress and flower-dusted hair smiled at him from the past, a reminder of a life built on love, sacrifice, and integrity. Truman sipped from a chipped mug that read, "World's Best Husband," a gift Eleanor had given him 20 years ago. The coffee steamed upward, but even its warmth could not chase away the ache in his chest. Last night's confrontation had shattered what remained of his relationship with Amos. The image of his son, head in hands, tears mixing with desperation, was one Truman knew would haunt him for years. But truth had been spoken. The phone rang again. Violet's name glowed on the screen. Truman answered quickly, his voice gentle. "Truman?" Violet's voice wavered, thick with tears but edged with resolve. "I never knew. About the debts, about the plan. None of it. I'm filing for divorce. I can't raise our children with a man who would betray his own father like that." Truman closed his eyes. The weight of her words pressed heavily, but beneath it was strength, a kind of courage Eleanor would have admired. "You and the children will always have a place here, Violet. None of this was your doing." "Thank you," Violet whispered. "The kids want to visit soon. They asked about you this morning. Sarah even said she wants to show you the family drawing she started last night." Truman smiled faintly, tears stinging his eyes. "Anytime. Tell them Grandpa's door is always open." When the call ended, he sat for a long time staring at Eleanor's photo. He could almost hear her voice, the way she used to speak softly when she was worried. "Keep the family together, Truman. Don't let distance grow between you and Amos." "I tried, Eleanor," he murmured, "but I won't let greed destroy what you built. Not anymore." A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Frank Larson stood there, bundled against the cold, his weathered face marked with concern. "How are you holding up, friend?" Truman gestured him inside. "It hurts, Frank, but the lies are gone now. I'm free of them." "You did the right thing," Frank said firmly. "Truth matters, even when it cuts deep. Eleanor would be proud." They sat together over fresh coffee, talking about locks that needed changing, bank accounts that needed tightening, wills that needed revising. Practical things, but unding ones. Frank's quiet presence reminded Truman that even in betrayal, true friendship remained. After Frank left, Truman carefully stored Eleanor's documents in a fireproof box, sealing them away where no desperate hand could reach. Then he called his attorney, scheduling an appointment to revise his will so that Amos would never again be in line to touch Eleanor's savings. Those shares, those millions, would go to causes she believed in: veterans rebuilding their lives, scholarships for teachers, community programs that lifted families instead of tearing them down. By mid-morning, a text buzzed on his phone. "Violet again. The kids want to know when they can come visit Grandpa Truman." His heart swelled. He typed back, "Anytime. We'll make new traditions together." Truman stood at the window, looking out at the snow-blanketed street. The world outside glistened, white and clean, like a canvas waiting for fresh beginnings. Eleanor's photo caught the morning light, her smile bright and unwavering. "Your legacy will live on," he whispered. "Not in greed, not in betrayal, but in truth, in honor, in the kind of love you always believed in." The pain of losing Amos was heavy, yes, but in its place grew something steadier: clarity. He would not let deceit define the rest of his life. He would build new traditions with Violet and the grandchildren, invest in lives that mattered, and guard Eleanor's memory with the dignity it deserved. As he opened the front door to breathe in the crisp December air, Truman realized that while blood had betrayed him, love had not. Real family was not bound by obligation, but by truth, loyalty, and respect. The snow sparkled in the morning sun, carrying with it the promise of new beginnings, and for the first time in years, Truman felt not abandoned, not broken, but free.